Welcome to the Solana Weekly Podcast, brought to you by SolanaFloor, where we share the top news stories of the week. Let's get into it.
All right, GM, what is up, everybody? I am Thomas Bahamas, and you are here for the Solana Weekly News live stream, brought to you, of course, by SolanaFloor. So Jack's out this week, so it is me in the driver's seat. And joining me today is the man who actually writes the newsletter, our senior journalist, Finn Miller. GM Finn.
GM Thomas, how are we getting on? Big day, big day.
I am doing great. I am woke up excited and excited to be here.
This is probably the biggest of days we've had, I think, for a very long time. Obviously, SpaceX IPO today. This is probably the biggest financial liquidity event in market history. A $1.75 trillion IPO from Elon Musk, the richest man in the world himself, and made more important because it's happening on Solana as well. This is the first time I think that an IPO of this scale is also happening on chain, alongside the ringing of the Nasdaq bell. And we've got an incredible guest with us this week to help us talk through what exactly is going on there. So, Thomas, should we bring him on? Do you want to introduce the man himself?
Yeah, of course. So let's get right to it, right? This is the most important story. We have got Saeed on today. So he is joining us. He's the CEO of Wormhole Labs, who is in control of Sunrise, and they are helping launch day one, the SpaceX IPO, available for everybody on Solana. Welcome to the show. How are you doing, sir?
Great. Thanks, Thomas. Thanks, Finn. Great to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. What a day so far. How are you feeling? What are the vibes like so far?
The vibes are pretty good. It just feels like a historic day. And right now, because of the IPO process, it's just kind of a nail biter. Nobody really knows when it's going to actually start to list. And so everyone's just glued to their screens. Really around the world,
Yeah.
I'm in Europe right now, and just hearing what people are saying this past week on the street. I was in Asia last week, just hearing everyone talk about this IPO, and you kind of realize like these kinds of events are global, and it's very hard to really understand the scale of attention, or like the scale that an IPO like this is able to garner. So I'm excited to see how it plays out. Obviously, Sunrise is playing a very critical role in terms of being an asset gateway for this IPO on Solana, and so us, alongside our partners Backpack, are really glued to our screens, trying to see when trading starts.
Awesome. So I do want to dive into exactly how Sunrise factors into this in a minute. But you did mention that the process with which this goes live on the Nasdaq is quite complicated. It's quite nuanced. Do you want to just walk us through why it's not like a crypto launch where we get given a time and on that block the asset goes live and everyone just piles in? Do you want to walk us through how the first kind of 2-3 hours of trading on an IPO day happens?
Yep. As soon as the bell rings, basically they start building a book. So bids are being submitted, but they're not being filled. And there's a lead underwriter, which is Goldman Sachs, alongside a bunch of other underwriters, which are all kind of the typical investment banks that you can think of. And what they're doing is they're going through price discovery. They're trying to figure out what price should this auction clear at. And sometimes it takes an hour, sometimes it takes 3 hours. So it can take quite some time. If you're looking at the news, I saw a bunch of figures today. I think the latest one I saw was that there's 350 billion worth of demand for this listing, and that's just an incredible amount of money. I think there's only 75 billion available at the 135 price, but we don't know what price the actual auction is going to clear at. There's been some indications that's been reported today. I don't know if you guys saw that, but we saw indications at 175, 160, 165 that Bloomberg was reporting and other financial media was reporting. So basically you go through that process of an auction, and everyone clears at the same price once the underwriter, which in this case Goldman Sachs, gives the green light. And that's when trading commences, and that's when you actually have a live market and a chart, and you can start seeing the performance of the equity on exchange on the Nasdaq. So no one knows. I don't think even Elon Musk knows right now. There's probably people at Goldman Sachs who have a good indication of how close they are. Could be during this interview. It could be 10 minutes from now, an hour from now. We don't know. So everyone's just kind of glued, and that adds to the suspense. It adds to the excitement. Everyone's coming in, everyone's tuning in, trying to see, hey, what does this thing open at, and how does it perform throughout the day?
Yeah, I can feel the excitement right now as you're talking about it. So, okay, so as they're going through this price discovery, we've got the bids. Once they actually set them and this goes live, what's that process like for you guys, and how quickly is that going to be available on Solana for people to actually start trading?
The goal is to be as close to exchange listing as possible. Ultimately, it's, again, the traditional financial system is very slow, as you can see. Like, it's taking them multiple hours to kind of price this. You would think that, like, with all the technology and speed, that, hey, this could have been handled before 9:30 a.m., right? But it's just not the way the world works. That's where kind of DeFi comes in, right? So DeFi wants to be as close to it. We've spoken to all of the ecosystem partners who are going to be providing this asset for trading. They want it as close as possible. The asset issuers themselves want it as close as possible. Our job is to make sure that they have the infrastructure, and that we've done a good job in terms of allowing for that asset to kind of be surfaced in every app, every AMM, every DEX, whatever asset wants to carry this or provide this to their user, that they have it available. I think throughout the week, especially since Wednesday, we've seen tremendous amount of coverage for SPCX, tremendous amount of excitement for the way that Backpack is issuing this. One of our goals was to make sure that there was instant redemptions, like as close to instant as possible. And I think that what Backpack has been able to do is basically S tier at this point. It is now the new standard, which is, hey, if you have a token for a tokenized equity, you can transfer it to your brokerage. You can redeem it for the underlying, and then you can also transfer it between your brokerages. So if you want to take it from Backpack Securities to Charles Schwab or Fidelity, that process is available to you, just like owning a share in a traditional financial brokerage is today. So I think that was a huge kind of step function improvement in how these tokenized RWAs are built and issued. At the same time, you've got to have all of the other things that matter to equity holders in TradFi. A mechanism for dividends that's very elegant. It's not cumbersome. A very clear ownership structure where you're not just kind of giving your money to a random entity somewhere that says, hey, we'll promise you this, but there's all this, terms and conditions that really kind of neuter some of your investor rights. So we've been really excited about that product. We think that's where the entire RWA industry is going to end up having to move. We already, even if you keep up with some of the discussions when it comes to regulations on this topic, like, this seems to be the way that you should tokenize real world assets. And so we expect all of the other partners and asset issuers who are working on this to kind of see this example and make adjustments. But ultimately that's up for the market to decide.
I 100% agree that tokenized stocks as they were was very much a 0 to 1 moment for RWAs on chain. I think this new integration and this new composability that Backpack is bringing with these other brokerages is a 1 to 100 moment. I think it really lifts the ceiling on what RWAs can achieve. And I think being able to do corporate actions, doing dividends and things like that on chain is a massive step forward that I think people aren't, that hasn't really soaked in enough to, I think, the DeFi economy just yet. But obviously that's going to be coming with time. Outside of that, what does Sunrise manage otherwise? Because obviously you're deeply integrated across the DeFi network on Solana. What is included as part of making the Backpack variant of SpaceX the canonical asset for this on Solana?
I mean, it's really working in depth on the token standard. Solana has a great set of token standards, one being 2022. There are some capabilities in there that are brought to bear to kind of give the experience that we talked about. And that's really like where we have a lot of experience, obviously, in the interoperability space. We understand competing token standards, different forms of token standards, different forms of consensus, different levels of finality, all of these types of things. So you can think of us leaning very heavily on our experience in terms of bringing assets, crypto native assets from two different worlds, two different blockchains in this example, to also trying to bring a lot of that expertise to bear when it comes to building the bridge between TradFi and DeFi, and like being part of this unification, one global market where you can trade anything. Exactly what Solana was built for, right?
Yeah.
An internet capital market that can move at the speed of Nasdaq. And so today we'll see something that debuts on Nasdaq, but will be available across all of the decentralized exchanges on Solana. And that's really what it's about, and that's really what we're excited to see.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, when I think about the bull case for Solana, it's the everything exchange, right? Bringing all the assets tradable. And, I personally use a lot more spot. So that's like what's very interesting to me. When people first saw, Sunrise was the Monad launch, right? You guys basically launched that token. I think it was an hour after the launch of an entire L1 system. You guys had the token live on Solana, which I think that alone was a really big step in the right direction and really like proved the thesis out. But now you're actually doing this with IPOs on like on the biggest day of, like, is this the direction that you guys see yourselves moving forward? Is like, okay, IPOs come out, we're going to be able to list these day of, this is the, what everybody's looking at. We're bringing that to Solana. Like, is that where you guys see yourselves going more?
Well, I see it as an expansion, right? I see it as the mission that we set out to do was, it hadn't been done before, where you had a non-native crypto TGE asset perform very well and take advantage of the just sheer community that is built up here, investor community, trader community that's built up here in Solana. Yeah. And you really haven't seen that on any blockchains. No one's really trading other blockchains as native assets. Their big assets are not there's not very deep liquid markets for them. And the thesis was that Solana was the right place for this. And that was backed up by a tremendous amount of data and just us being builders on Solana, since close to the beginning, right? And so we knew that non-native crypto assets was a very hard category to crack, and there's a lot of fundamental reasons why people hadn't done it before. We thought we had the expertise on the infrastructure side to make sure that it was a smooth process, and we also thought we could partner up with the asset issuers themselves and work together in a way to make it a success, and also partner up with the ecosystem as well and say, hey, let's this is good for Solana. This is also good for your user base, your protocol, and everything kind of aligned from there. That was able to be a success. Then we did our first collectible launch last week, and that's a brand new category as well. That is actually very exciting. A lot of people are into it, and we wanted to again help a partner, an asset issuer that had an idea to kind of execute that in a way that actually led to something meaningful within the ecosystem. And now we have one of our bigger moments, right, which is to expand into a brand new category, which is RWA's equities specifically, right? And so choosing the right issuer, working with them in depth to make sure that the experience is great, and being able to support them and get that over the line is super important for us. So I wouldn't say it's a pivot. I would just say that if you are going to help support Solana become a global internet, capital market with one unified market, like you've got to expand categories. They're all very, very different, and they all come with their own specific, idiosyncrasies, specializations. Things are just different for each category that you have to kind of build for and think through. And so we think very deeply with our asset issuers on how to approach that. There are other categories that are coming down the pipe, and it's not just new categories, but it's also expanding the categories. So you see the crypto assets growing week over week. Same thing we'll see with the collectibles. We'll see that as well with equities, and then there's a couple more categories that are in the pipe before the end of the year that we're excited about as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, you can see it in the volume with the foreign assets that you've brought onto Solana. There's like, hundreds of millions of dollars of volume, and the actual execution that you're able to get on these assets is unreal, right? I don't think you can get as good of execution anywhere else as you can on Solana for a lot of them. So I think that it's incredible what you guys are doing, and I'd love to see it. It, personally helped me when, you guys bring assets over, you can still be a Solana maxi and you could still own a little bit of Hype or Zcash on Solana, right? Yep. So I think that you guys doing that was a big step forward.
Yep, we crossed I think 2 bill a couple days ago. Last month we celebrated 500 mil in trailing 30-day volume, like with the foreign assets that were brought in via Sunrise. And so the growth has been pretty incredible, and the thesis seems to be playing out very well. And our goal is to just kind of keep up with that and make sure that we can keep supporting across new categories.
I want to come back to the IPO very briefly for SpaceX. Now, it seems quite peculiar to me that this is happening on a Friday, because normally, you'd IPO a bit earlier in the week, you'd have the whole week for price discovery to happen, but Elon's trying to push us through on, the last trading day before everyone takes 2 days off. With this in mind, how important is what's going to happen on-chain over the weekend to, market structure and the perception of crypto markets in general moving forward?
Elon made this as hard as it can possibly be for all market participants that are trying to build, a 24/7 open financial system. So, the easy answer here is it's just very difficult, right? 24-hour markets are tough. They're tough for Hyperliquid. They're going to be tough for Solana as well. But if you don't actually have an ecosystem who is taking bets and has at least the opportunity to try to prove it out, let the market makers, let the traders, let the hedge funds, let the trading desks, let the protocols themselves have a shot at competing, because that's the only way that you'll learn and get better. And so some people say, hey, it's the markets are less efficient than when it's Monday through Friday. The spreads widen out, liquidity pulls out a little bit over the weekend. I mean, that's what we've traditionally seen on Hyperliquid. I think Solana can do a much better job simply because it has a tremendous spot trading base that people are only recently starting to understand, and it has almost every global large token trading operation, whether it's highly sophisticated like the big market making names that you guys know, or smaller shops all over the world that have been integrated and understand how to use the ecosystem and understand how to use the venues and really understand microstructure here. And so you want to give them the shot to kind of compete and prove themselves there. And that's what I'm hoping to see over this initial weekend. Again, you're launching on a Friday. You have one trading day worth of data about the price of the asset, and then you have to go and kind of figure out over the weekend. So I'm excited to see how market participants kind of perform here. And I think regardless of the performance, it's going to get better week over week, month over month, and you just got to make sure you're just providing the infrastructure for people to get better. And that's kind of what Sunrise likes to see.
Okay, and so you touched on Spot there, you touched on perps, you touched on Hyperliquid. Obviously, we've seen the price discovery on Hyperliquid for the SpaceX IPO has so far been pretty consistent with what we're seeing happening on the Nasdaq right now. You mentioned Spot there versus perps. Why would Spot be a better measure of price discovery than perps for something like this over the weekend?
I mean, Spot is actual capital. It's not leveraged capital, right? So you can show a lot larger volume numbers because you're taking leverage. And so and people think that there's a huge discrepancy between the size of the spot market and the size of the total perp market by volume. To me, it's not that large, given the fact that most of that volume is concentrated amongst a few users who are able to use a lot of leverage, right? So you're really only talking about a 3, maybe 3.5x market gap. If one is 5 billion, the other is like 18 billion, right, in volume at some time duration scale, right? So it's like, I think the number I saw last month at the end of the quarter was like close to 5 billion and then 12 billion, right? Like that was kind of the difference between spot and perps on chain. And I'm like, okay, well there's a lot of growth, right? It's much easier to add spot assets than it is to actually bootstrap liquidity for spot markets. And so if you're able to do that really well and grow that over time, there's a large amount of stickiness there. And the gap to me isn't so wide as well. So I think spot markets are going to continue to be important. And I think simply because there's less leverage in the spot markets, more users kind of gravitate over time. Like you can only blow up your account so many times before you're like, that's a day, that's a tough game to play. But both have their place in the market, and both are going to figure out to compete with each other. I just think that currently Solana does spot really well, and we'll see how Hyperliquid kind of performs, how Solana performs. When as it relates to RWAs, that's still a big open question.
Yeah,
there's not very many markets. There's the volumes kind of are very small relative to what they can be. So I think it's a very interesting market segment to be competing in.
Yeah, it really is. And for people that aren't like Solana native, and for people just kind of trying to figure out how this is working, where they can actually access this on chain, how does that price discovery work? After hours, right? Market closes and you can still trade. The market's open on weekends and you can still trade, and we will see a lot of price discovery come from both Solana Spot and Hyperliquid. But how would you explain that to somebody that's kind of just showing up here?
I would say that, like, again, it's the nuts and bolts of it is that there are firms, there are traders and trading desks that are willing to price and build, long duration pricing models on where they expect to see the price, and everyone is kind of referencing each other. All these different markets are referencing each other. And so, like, it's not a total black box. It's just about the more capital being transacted, the more confidence you have in a price, right? Like, so the more liquidity there is, the more volumes there are, the more you can kind of feel really comfortable about trading an asset over the weekend. And so I think if you're just showing up to trade, it's a huge unlock for you, right? You have some reason, some motivation, you want to buy, you want to own something. It just so happens to be, Friday night. You can do that. You can express that on chain. And again, like, we just saw the CME launch 24-hour oil markets, right? And gold markets, 24/7 oil and gold markets. They didn't launch it yet, but they submitted the proposal for approval, right? And so crypto is really dragging the traditional financial world to where it is today. And I think when that happens, I think that's going to be a catalyst for DeFi.
You talk about crypto dragging TradFi along the way, and crypto having a pretty distinct edge in a lot of this. I see this event, I see this IPO as a massive net win for crypto. I think the fact that anybody anywhere in the world with a phone and internet connection can buy the biggest financial event in market history just over the internet on Solana, I think is an incredible step forward for the industry as a whole. But for me, this is obviously a big win on one side, and I believe in balance. I believe in zero-sum markets. Someone is losing here. Is it TradFi? Is it retail money pouring into the largest IPO of all time, or is it something else? Do you have a view on there at all?
I mean, honestly, like, I don't know if there is a loser. This is very much the growing the pie kind of story, right? Like, even ask the people who are trading oil and Hyperliquid during this war. None of them traded oil before, right? So it's really growing the pie, but and it's also a very non-US story. Like, these assets are not for US people. A lot of people in the US that I talk to, they're just like, well, I have great exchanges that I can go on Robinhood and I can do this. And it's like, yeah, most of these tokenized assets, like, they're just not for US people. Like you have an entire world out there that, didn't get to buy Apple when it IPO'd and didn't get to do this, didn't get to do that, simply based on geography. Now you have asset issuers and you have different market participants who are coming in and saying, like, hey, we think that this is actually good for everyone. This is a grow the pie kind of thing. yeah, so I don't know. I don't know if there is particularly a loser. I think there may be a loser in 5-6 years, but I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of leveling up the UI when it comes to crypto company offerings, and but as of right now, I think it's just good. It's just good for capital markets globally. Like you're just unlocking demand that was sitting there, like legitimate, good quality, productive demand that you would like to have. And I think I like to see that.
Yeah, we love to see it too. I mean, democratizing access to this is one of the promises of what crypto was supposed to do, right? Open up markets to everyone. So for you guys to play a part in this, it's amazing. I love what you're doing. I think we're gonna be wrapping here pretty soon, but I got to ask you. Everyone wants to know, like, what's next? Are we going to see Anthropic? Is it OpenAI? Is it the next big IPOs? You teased a couple other products. You want to talk about what's coming next?
I mean, I think all of the above, everything you mentioned is definitely on the board. Yeah, I mean, look, ultimately, like we've kind of kept the same gauge since our first one, which is, hey, does the ecosystem want this? Does the community want this? If that's the case, then we'll work with the asset issuers. We'll work with anyone that we need to kind of bring it on Solana and help it along its journey. So that's our main heuristic. We're going to keep to it. It's been successful so far. Yeah, we're excited.
Yeah, we are too. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. I mean, it's a treat to talk to somebody that's helping, with one of the biggest narratives on Solana today. Everyone, check out SpaceX, and thank you so much for joining us, Saeed.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah. Yes, I will get back to watching those charts.
Yeah, there you go. Bye.
Yeah.
Oh man, that was fantastic. I'm so excited about SpaceX right now. That is awesome to hear.
Yeah, I think they've come a long way, Sunrise. I think they made a huge splash with their first launch, like you said, with Monad, and since then they have just added more and more assets. The trajectory and the momentum and velocity of the listings has been incredible, and I think this SpaceX IPO is actually elevating them to the next level. As I mentioned, you're stepping out of crypto and into RWAs during one of the biggest market events in history. I think top work, well done, Sunrise. You guys are crushing it.
Yeah. And I mean, when you think of it in context of, where Solana fits into, crypto and traditional finance, finance in general, if we're at the forefront of pricing these assets, over this weekend, it's just huge, right? Like, like that, the implications of that playing out are just massive in my mind. So I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I think it is the start of something quite special. And as he mentioned, I think this new feature from Backpack, where they're enabling a whole new range of services to tokenize assets, is incredible, because for a long time we've had tokenized assets. That's not new, but the fact that we can now do dividends, we can do corporate actions, there's so much more going on there, and being able to move assets between brokerages and on-chain opens up a whole bunch of arbitrage opportunities that I think the on-chain economy has been waiting for. So this is a 1 to 100 moment, I think, for DeFi and for RWAs in general.
I think you're right. And I mean, as far as like having these tokens be redeemable, and like almost like composable across TradFi is unreal. Like I like before, you weren't really sure about, what the claim was to a lot of these RWAs, where, he just laid out the case. The claim is the actual equity, right?
Yeah, and having shareholder rights, I think, is so important. For so long, RWAs and crypto just meant you have price exposure, you have directional alignment, and you benefit on price going up or down. But there's no real kind of value there. There's no equity right. There's no no shareholder right. So for me, this is a massive step, and it's probably going to propel on-chain capital markets to the next level. In the interest of time, I think we should push on through the newsletter and get into our second story. So this one here. World Series of Poker and Solana Foundation bring crypto payments to poker's biggest stage. This one took me by surprise, Thomas. I know that Solana loves gambling. I know that the trenches love gambling on Solana. I didn't know that the Solana Foundation was actually going to ink a partnership with the World Series of Poker, who is obviously one of the biggest names in the sport. They've distributed over $4 billion in prizes over 6 decades. And now Solana is basically branded all across these events. Thomas, how big do you think this is, first of all? What's your knee-jerk reaction to this?
I think it's huge. So I come from a poker background. That's how I got into crypto. So I actually think that there is just so much crossover between the two communities, right? It's online poker. There's in real life poker. There's a lot of money that goes around. There's degens there. A lot of them are like very math focused. A lot of the early poker players were like the early ones to Bitcoin, to Ethereum, and to Solana, right? So a lot of them understand this completely. And I think that, historically, online poker has been like the easiest thing to point at and say, this is why crypto needs to exist, right? Like they basically banned all forms of payment on and off of these different online poker sites. And what replaced them was Bitcoin in the early days. So a lot of people got Bitcoin pilled pretty early. And, I think a lot of those skills were pretty transferable to crypto. So for us to be able to do this and bring, payment processing for a lot of the World Series of Poker tournaments, and I think the advertising in general is pretty good, but I think it's more than just like a sponsored logo, right? There is actual utility that they're providing for them. So I'm incredibly bullish on it. What's your take?
Well, my first reaction was that this does seem like, just a good sponsorship deal, an incredible sponsorship deal, no less. Obviously, World Series Poker is a massive brand, and having Solana, visually everywhere for this kind of event is spectacular.
Yeah.
But there is a bit more to it. If I understand correctly, payments and winnings can be wired out on chain. You can, your buy-in can also be carried out on chain. That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah,
look, it is a good start. I'm curious as to whether there's a subset of poker players who are not already crypto pilled, because as you mentioned, there's huge crossover between the online poker community and the crypto community. The two go hand in hand together. There's a lot of crossover. Do you think that this is bringing net new eyes onto Solana, or do you think that everybody who plays poker or follows World Series poker events is already aware of what Solana is and how it works and what it offers them?
Okay, so I think there's a couple things there, right? So I think first of all, you couldn't buy into any of these events using crypto before this, right? So the World Series of Poker has an app where you like register for tournaments and find out where they are, what table you're at, and everything, and you can buy in directly on there, right? No, there were no crypto options before Solana came in, and Solana is the only option now. So I think that the community that is already involved in crypto has a way to actually express that now. They can actually pay. They might have to bridge over from Ethereum or whatever, but I feel like those like bridging fees have gone down significantly. And if you're going to pay with USDC on Solana, there's no processing fees, right? So right. I think that we will see a lot of that, and I think that a lot of crypto or a lot of like poker wealth is held in crypto in general. So I think we'll see that, but also I think we'll see other people that will see Solana and like there's a lot of like staking and like money passing between people in poker where it's like a lot of it's like IOUs, like like I'll spot your $1,000 buy-in, just pay me back if you win, or pay me back if you don't, where it's like, all right, you can actually just do that in a second with Solana and a Solana wallet, where I think that it can get ingrained a lot more in the community and provide a lot more use. So I don't know. I still think there's a lot more.
I guess like the ultimate end game for this is that all the poker actually happens on chain. All the kind of financial side of it all happens on chain. Yeah. And maybe this is the first step in that direction, and that in 2 years' time, in 4 years' time, the underneath wiring is all built out on Solana rails. And given the progress that's been made in the Solana payment sector, I'm sure that's something that the foundation has on the agenda.
Yeah, and something that I haven't even seen mentioned is that there is a lot of online poker that is played. I think the World Series of Poker has their own online poker site. So maybe you bring payments through Solana on there as well, and that becomes more of like a lot more usage comes from that. But I mean, there's 100 tournaments at the World Series of Poker in Vegas, and then there's multiple circuit events that go throughout the year as well. So these are a lot of tournaments, and I mean these tournament buy-ins are big, right? A small one would be $1,000 buy-in, and the bigger ones are $100,000. So these are people with a lot of money, and it's not easy to carry a lot of money around, right? It's not necessarily the easiest thing to walk around with $100,000 cash. What are you going to do? Go to a bank, say, hey, I need a bunch of big stacks of cash, and then you throw that on the table. Like, there's a lot of like wiring that goes into it. There's a lot of like boxes where people store their cash. So I think that there is a lot of efficiencies that this can solve.
I think the real winner of this deal is actually MoonPay, because MoonPay is going to be there. They're going to be, processing all the off-ramping and on-ramping, and they'll be, servicing everyone doing that really, really well. So they're going to get huge user acquisition. They're probably going to do quite well with the fees from there. So well done MoonPay as well on being involved in this deal, I would say.
Yeah, I'd say that. And I don't know if Vibhu actually won any of the tournaments, but I mean, he got to take pictures on the table with chips in front, like holding, making it look like he won the tournament. So I feel like that was pretty cool when he was like holding the bracelet.
Yeah, good time. Good time for poker players, good time for Solana lovers. It's the perfect blend. We're going to push on through story number 3 in this newsletter. One DAT to rule them all. Forward Industries pursues Solmate acquisition. This is fascinating. I remember way back in the day, we wind back to September, October, and people were discussing what happens to DATs once, Sol goes down, once Sol drops 50, 70%. All of a sudden, these DATs are down bad, and, the sharks come out, and, the apex predator starts circling. He's looking to scoop up cheap Sol from these other operators who are, perhaps down a bit worse than him, who are struggling to make ends meet. And we're starting to see that happen. So what happened basically with this story was that at first, Forward Industries put through a private offer to buy out Brera Holdings, which is the parent company of Solmate, one of the smaller DATs in the stack. And that was originally refused. Solmate said, no, we don't have anything to do with this. We're quite comfortable with how things are going, and we're sure we're going to ride this out very easily. Under Irish takeover rules, Forward Industries then had to publish a public letter. This was released through a press release, and they basically explained the deal itself. And what's on offer is that Forward Industries, led by Chairman Kyle Samani, who we all know very well, is offering to buy out existing Solmate stock in an all-stock deal. It's going to be converted over to Forward Industries stock at a 30% premium to Solmate's current price. It sounds like a pretty good deal. If I was a Solmate shareholder and I could, look at this chart here that I'm seeing of the Solmate chart, and I was offered a 30% bounce to get out of that and roll into a larger DAT, who is perhaps a bit more resilient and a bit more prepared to kind of go the distance on this experiment. I think that's encouraging. But look, it has been a pretty scandalous affair. Thomas, what's your takeaway here?
Yeah, I've kind of been wondering myself, like, all right, why aren't these DATs buying a lot more discounted Solana, right? They bought the top, and now it's time to kind of buy the dip, but maybe they're actually just playing the bigger game where they're going after full other companies with holdings. I think it's like a fascinating turnout of events. It's interesting that they're kind of doing it in public like this. I think there was a Dudas tweet where he was kind of questioning the reasoning for doing this. Are they actually in negotiations with somebody else, and this is like a negotiating tactic, I think was the underlying meaning of the tweet. But at the end of the day, I think if, I don't know, in my mind, Kyle Samani seems like he's not going anywhere, right? Like he's playing the long game on this. He's still making, $100,000 bets on price of Sol on Twitter. Like, I think that, ultimately, if Forward Industries ends up with, buying some of these other DATs, we're probably in a better position long term. And it is also funny, when these DATs were coming out, the way that a lot of them were talking is like they were talking, okay, what do we do when this goes down? And everything did go down, and everyone's panicking. So I don't know, like it is exciting. Like, I don't know what the best case scenario, like what would be like the ideal scenario here for you?
Well, I don't know if it is good if all the DATs coalesce into one big super DAT. If Samani and the gang over at Forward Industries go around and they buy up all the other DATs that are really struggling and they're on the bones of their bums and they can't make ends meet, that just means that Forward Industries coalesces into this giant giga DAT that's got a huge amount of stake and that's got a huge amount of influence. That skews decentralization. That puts a lot of power into the hands of someone who evidently already had a lot of power in Solana. But you can see here that the Forward Industries chart doesn't look that different to the Solmate chart. This DAT experiment kind of played out both ways for both companies. I think the difference is that Forward Industries is obviously just a lot better capitalized than Solmate was. There's been a bit of bickering on the Solmate board between Rockaway ex-CEO Victor Fisher and the Solmate board there. I think that's also added to the concerns. I think there's been a bit of infighting there that Forward Industries is trying to capitalize on. But I also see this as an open invitation from Forward Industries to break bread with other small DATs who might be struggling. I think a lot of other DATs might see this and they might go, look, if we can get 25-30% bump selling out to Forward Industries, maybe that's something that we need to pursue. Look, the DAT game is in a very, very difficult spot. I think we can all agree that they probably didn't expect Sol to go from $250 down to $60. Solmate quite publicly bought locked Sol from the foundation at about $170, I want to believe, and they're now down quite badly on that. So it's a very, very tough run for the DATs. Do you think, Thomas, that the DATs are going to be okay? Do you think they're going to pull through this? Do you think that Sol goes up and then all of a sudden the DATs look like geniuses? How do you see this moving forward?
I don't know. I will probably see some pain, right? Like I don't want there to be any, and in an ideal world, one of these turns into a micro strategy and just starts buying a ton of them, and the price of Solana 10x's, right? But like I don't see that happening in the short term. And how long can they go on being down 70% from their purchase price? I don't know. It was the DAT experiment a bad one? Especially when there's a lot of little different one, not little, but when there's a lot of these that are struggling, and a lot of them are probably weighing being bought out. So I don't know. I think it is a risk. How big of a risk? I guess we'll see. I definitely don't want any of them to have to unwind, but that might be the case.
A lot of people are saying that it might be what needs to happen to mark the bear market bottom, and then once all the DATs have been liquidated, all that SOL is flowing freely again, that we can start moving up. I don't know if I subscribe to that view, but I would be a buyer of any DAT unwind. I think that would, any kind of forced selling, any liquidations would mark, I think, a bottom point for SOL. So look, we'll have to see what comes out over the next few months, but look, it's not looking good for the DATs basically at this stage.
Yeah. We'll have to keep an eye on them. I don't know. I don't have too much else to go on that one. I think we should go over to Helium. What do you think?
Yes. So pushing through, story number 4 in the newsletter. HNT nosedives at 53% as community pushes back on Helium governance proposal. Now, this story is a humdinger because Helium has been everywhere in the news the last week. Obviously, around a week ago, Helium Mobile, the consumer-focused telco company of the Helium network, was acquired by Andrew Yang's Noble Mobile. That is obviously a separate entity to Helium Network, which is the deep in network that we all know and love. But Helium Network is finding itself in deep water even so. It's not looking good for them in the sense that there has been some, what people would call, misrepresentation of their revenue. This has all come from a governance proposal that was launched or floated around a week ago, I believe. And this governance proposal centers around 4 very, very key principles. So I've got them up here. The first principle is Helium wants to set a floor for deployer earnings. Second is they want to capitalize operations and growth through the mint of 141 million HNT tokens over 36 months. They want to establish a 7-seat advisory council with 5 community elected representatives. And they want to transition HNT rewards to an activity-based system rather than a flat rate for all providers. Now, the biggest thing that people are talking about, and the thing that a lot of HNT holders are very disgruntled about, is that part of this new growth plan that Helium has outlined includes the mint of 141 HNT tokens. Now, that's going to inflate the existing circulating supply by about 77%. It's a huge amount of new tokens to inject into an economy over 3 years. And it comes off the back of the realization that hotspot deployers have actually been subsidized by the network themselves. So we thought for a long time that Helium's revenue was absolutely gunning it. They were doing extremely well. The reality is, apparently, based on this proposal, that carrier offload has actually not been paying out as much as people expected. It's seeing here in this image that the target was 0.5, and the rate they're at today is 0.1. So, they're about 20% of what they wanted to be. The economic framework that originally, spearheaded the network has not quite made it. So they're needing to readjust. And obviously, this has been met quite badly by HNT holders. The token's been down about 50% since the last week. So nobody really wants to be holding Helium at this stage. The entire leadership team at Helium Network has, disbanded. They've departed. I think Noah Prince went off to Drift. Arpe's stepped down. And yeah, it's just looking a bit chaotic over in Helium. Thomas, what's your read here? Do you think that shifting this economic design, inflating with another 70% of the token supply, is a good idea for consistent growth, or do you think that this governance proposal is going to get knocked down by the community?
I mean, it does not look good. I follow a DCA watcher, and I've been watching, 1 million plus tokens get dumped. It's been hard. I'm a supporter of Helium. I use them. But to see what they're doing here, I mean, the token has struggled in price, and then to mint 141 million more tokens seems like a tough thing to get behind. It's really tough when you think about DePIN in general. I still think that Helium's, the premier DePIN project. They've done an incredible work, but if we're figuring out that they weren't actually making as much money as they were saying, this is pretty tough. But I don't know how you fix it, right? Is this the way out? Is to kind of print your way out and grow as much as you can? Maybe, that's one potential solution there. Is that something that a crypto community would get behind? Probably not, right?
Yeah, it's a difficult ask. I know that Ape has mentioned in this tweet here that he backs the team moving forward. He says, I actually saw it was Noah Prince who said that the original idea of Helium, and Amir Halim, who was the co-founder, it was a brilliant idea. It got things bootstrapped, set the company up from 0 to 1, and that works great for a time, but when you start thinking about expansion and you really need to apply a different strategy, the argument is that bolstering these rewards like this, minting out a whole lot of new tokens and changing the economic system so that there is a stable floor for deployers is actually the way forward to do that. We've seen Helium obviously has done incredibly well in terms of growing the network. They're all over the US. There's hundreds of thousands of hotspots. There's around 3 million daily users using carrier offload data. So the numbers are there. The hard numbers are there. People are using this network. Now it's just a matter of making sure that the economics behind it can actually catch up. So whether they do it, I would love to see them do it. I like Helium. I really want to see them succeed. But as Prince says here, the age of subsidy is over. So look, Helium Network can't continue to kind of foot the bill for a lot of this. Although what's going to happen is that rewards probably will come down. And like you mentioned, the DCAs on the token have been pretty harsh. So HNT is down pretty bad. Maybe that's just people front running the potential inflation of so many tokens. Maybe they've decided that actually DePIN's not for them. It's hard to know where this is going to go, Thomas.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, in the short term, you probably do need to make some pretty drastic changes in order to turn the ship around. And it doesn't seem like there is an easy or good solution that their community is going to get behind. So, maybe this is, them looking, I mean, they're not buying this to short-term flip it, right? Like they're buying this to continue and operate a very well running network, right? So they need to make long-term decisions and, maybe not listen to the short-term noise and go after it, right?
Yeah. Look, it's like I say, it's a thing. We love to see DePIN succeed. We love to see Helium succeed. So I hope that the community and the token holders and the governance process can find a way to make it work, and that Helium can pull itself out of this. I'm going to shift back to the newsletter because we're on to story number 5. This is one of my favorites. So obviously, we know I like perps. Bulk amasses $25.9 million in pre-deposit TVL ahead of its mainnet launch. So look, the Bulk's pre-deposit campaign has been going incredibly well. It started on June 1st, I believe, and within the first 9-10 days, they've managed to get $25.9 million in deposits. This is all from people who want to be there the day that the exchange launches. They want to be trading on day one. Obviously, they want to get some points as well. Bulk has said that they're going to do a 30% airdrop to its supporters, and depositing capital into the protocol before it goes live is a great way to do that. So, take this with a grain of salt. Farmers are going to farm. That's all very true. But what this means, and what I think is so brilliant about this, is that it means that on day one, there's going to be a huge amount of liquidity and a huge amount of margin flowing around on Bulk. And we've mentioned before that the cold start problem is very difficult for a perps exchange. You need to have liquidity, you need to have volume, and you need to have depth on your book, or else it doesn't make sense for professional traders and sizable traders to actually go there in the first place. So this pre-deposit campaign solves that. It's been doing really well. Thomas, are you going to be lining up to be trading on Bulk on day one?
Yeah, I've got a deposit in already. We've talked about this a lot, but what we need in perps is we need like a great campaign to get people going, get people excited, and get people trading. And, this seems like it's working, right? $25 million speaks for itself. Whether that's everybody farming or not, they're using the protocol, they've deposited on it. And, once everything's going to be live, they can use all of those funds. So I'm excited about it. I think there's a lot of hype around bulk, and, with the attention on perps right now, I'm excited to see it launching. I think that they get to kind of, use all of the Phoenix marketing and all of the perps talk to their advantage right now, right? It's on the top of everyone's mind. Right now, everyone's talking about trading, everyone's talking about perps. So for them to be able to launch right now and have, this much success, I'm excited. And, I'm going to be watching it. I've tested out the platform myself. It looks like it's running fantastically. So, everything about this excites me. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'll certainly be there on day one. And the other thing that is surprising, and that is, I'm pleasantly surprised to see, is that perps trading activity has actually remained pretty solid after, the events of the last month. Obviously, CT has been very vocal about the perps conundrum on Solana. Tolly's efforts to get everyone trading on Phoenix have worked to a degree. Arguably volume has tapered off, but if we look at these graphs here, we can see, volume has stayed pretty consistent. It's trended up since the beginning of the year. It had a wee bit of a dip last week, but now we're back. I would really like to see this continue. I would like to see this grow. I think bulk can play a huge role in that. I expect bulk to do really well right out of the gate. I think there's a lot of people who really want to be on this platform. They want to be, getting their aura up. They want to be exploring the new apps. And whether or not they're doing that for an airdrop, or whether they want to actually perform as traders, doesn't matter so much, because having traders there actually creates the exchange. If you've got that liquidity, then you get more traders coming. Liquidity begets liquidity, and that's what market makers want to see. That's what high frequency traders want to see. So if having a pre-deposit campaign to ensure that you have 30 mil of liquidity on the DEX the day it goes live is the reason to get there, then Godspeed. I think I'm desperately looking forward to this, and I hope that bulk can kind of pull us out of this perps drought that we're having.
Yeah. Yep. 100%. I agree. Let's see it. Does it say actually what day it goes live?
No, and the jury is still out on when that's going to be. Some have said a few weeks, some have said a few months. I would expect 2 months would be my ballpark figure, but I've got no idea. I'm looking forward to seeing the breadth of markets that are going to show up on bulk. I asked Kobe, I told him to put on VIX perp so we can trade volatility instead of specific assets. He seemed responsive to that idea. So yeah, look, hopefully bulk is going to crush it straight out of the gate, and Solana perps is going to get a real welcome boost.
Imagine all the assets that we're going to be able to trade in 2 months. I feel like the listing of assets, like all of these spot assets that we're getting, like, SpaceX, like I would imagine all of those will be able to be traded on bulk trade and other perps venues relatively soon, right? I'm very excited about the whole idea of that.
Yeah, let's fulfill the everything exchange internet capital markets thesis, in live. Pushing us back to story number 6 in the newsletter, Helius wants to make privacy the default on Solana through Light Protocol Exchange. So Helius, obviously, we all know Helius. Thank you, Mert, for building out one of the most resilient infrastructure protocols on Solana and running one of the largest validators. Helius, obviously, is spreading its wings. It's moving out of just RPCs and validatorship, and they're doubling down on privacy. So Helius has acquired Light Protocol, who have been around Solana for a very long time. It's a very reputable team who have worked a lot on zero-knowledge tech and zero-knowledge compression. And Helius now is looking at this expansive privacy layer for Solana. It's going to be fully composable, fully open source, and it's going to hopefully give Solana the privacy layer that it has been missing thus far. Obviously, Archium's been doing really well. They've released their early mainnet, and that's been going quite well. They just crossed 1 million computations, so evidently that's got some traction. But look, Solana's privacy sector is on the verge, I think, of something incredible. Thomas, what does this acquisition mean to you?
I think this is exciting. Mert's been talking about this for a while, and I did a video on privacy not that long ago, and a lot of it was kind of around the price of Zcash, but not just like the chart. That's showing the demand for privacy. So I think that there are a lot of people that A, want privacy, and B, want it on Solana, right? Everything on Solana is extremely transparent, right? Like we built the most transparent, fast, money system that you've ever seen. So to be able to have some of that, have some privacy, I think is needed. And I think of like a quick purchase at a grocery store, say we can use Solana for it. I don't want people seeing everything that I have in my wallet, just by buying a candy bar or whatever. So I think that there's a lot of practical use cases, and I think some of those are in the way of some adoption. So I am excited about this. I think that Helius has been pretty focused on this, and I'm excited to see what they bring out, right? Like Light has been a very well talked about project. I know that they've been building in the space for a while. So to see what they can come up with, like I'm really excited for that.
There's a part of me that pushes back on the privacy thesis a wee bit, because part of the whole idea of blockchain in in its infancy was that you could look at a public ledger and you could see everything, and you could see how much money was going to what wallet, you could see what everything held. And that was, at the time, that was one of the selling points of blockchain. That's why people loved it, because of that, public verification, because of that transparency. And now it feels almost like we're going full circle in a way that we actually want to obfuscate that, and we want to remove a lot of that transparency. I think there's obviously a difference between private and anonymous. Those are two separate things. But yeah, I don't want to discredit privacy. I think obviously there's a huge sector there, and there's a huge amount of demand, for various reasons. But it does feel like it's almost at odds with the original ethos of crypto in a way.
I think that's a fair take. Okay, so my take on this is privacy is bullish for individuals, and transparency is bullish for businesses, right? Like you want to be able to see what businesses are doing, to take a look at what's going on behind their token. You can see everything, but like to see the financial history of, my personal financial history, like I don't want to show that, like nobody wants to show that. We don't show our bank accounts, none of that is public. So why would we do that in crypto? And I think that crypto's to the point where like you can have a lot of your financial life, in crypto now, right? Most wallets are basically neobanks now, if you look at them. So I think that a lot of that is needed. And I think that's, pretty bullish for like the personal side of crypto.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think, businesses as well, they don't want to have, people looking at every single detail of what they're doing behind the scenes. They want to see what's being expensed. So regardless of whether it's directionally correct with the crypto ethos, and I think in many ways it is, right? Privacy is going to continue to do well. So people are always going to want it. And I think Helius is in the right place at the right time with this, obviously, with this acquisition. So I'm very curious to see what the Helius privacy layer is going to look like long term. And look, everyone wants privacy now, so it's good that people are providing it. Yeah.
No, I agree. It's interesting. We'll see how well it plays out. I think there is a good amount of demand for it.
I'm going to bring us back to the newsletter for Jack's favorite section of the newsletter. Unfortunately, he's not here to share it with us. But honorable mentions, the things that happened this week that didn't get into the newsletter as part of a story. But here we go. Solana Foundation launches Frontier Traders Initiative, a global community for elite traders. Phoenix lists NVIDIA and Apple perps with 20x leverage. Solana joins MasterCard's Agent Pay for machines. Archeum Mainnet Alpha crossed 1 million confidential computations. Loopscale launches Loopscale Earn, packing multiple complex strategies into a single position. Backpack Securities launches in public beta. And finally, over 215,000 TCG packs were opened this week on Collector Crypt, a new weekly all-time high. Thomas, what stands out? What do you like?
Well, I did just do a full video on Pokemon and the TCG cards. I mean, I didn't know that this whole mania was going on with Pokemon and the cards. And for them to bring it on Solana, I think is actually like pretty perfect. I think it's a good fit. So I'm going to go with that. I know that's a curveball, but 215,000 of these packs opened in a week is insane. Like there is a ton of use on there. And I think it's, it's been overlooked, at least by me. So to see the growth on that side, I think is fun. And people are having fun on chain, right? Like I want to see that. I think it's retail that's doing it. So I want to keep seeing that going. What's your favorite, Finn?
Yeah, I will tell you my favorite thing, but I do want to touch on that. I think the cards thing is really cool because obviously while the prolific growth of all these platforms is incredible, it does show that people are having a lot of fun doing this. You scroll through Twitter and you see a lot of guys, they're having an awesome time opening their cards. And it is, for a lot of people, it's making crypto fun again. And that's actually what we need in the bear market to kind of get through downward price action and a lot of that negativity. So well done, Collect Crypt. Well done to everyone ripping packs and getting cards they want. I'm split here, Thomas, on my favorite honorable mention. I'm going to go with Backpack Securities because, as I mentioned earlier at the top of the call with Saeed, I think this is the 1 to 100 moment for RWAs. I think the fact that prior to this new feature, we were basically tracking price, and there was no dividends, there was no corporate actions, there was no shareholder rights, and there was basically no reason to hold these assets apart from hoping that the stock itself will go up. This changes everything for RWAs. I feel like Backpack has absolutely nailed it for this launch, especially timing it with the SpaceX IPO. So for me, that's the top story coming out of these lists.
Yeah, that was going to be my second, because that is awesome, right? For us to fully have these equities on chain like this, like shout out to Armani. Like I think that they crushed it with this, and the interoperability is just like insane.
Yeah, nailed it. Pushing through, earlier this week, you did a video on the case for liquid staking over native staking. Do you want to, give me the Reader's Digest version of that? Why should I be more interested in liquid staking than native staking?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about interoperability and composability. I mean, essentially, if you are an active user on Solana, you should be liquid staking. Like right now, DeFi is in a little bit of a rough spot, but if you ever wanted to borrow against it, if you ever wanted to transfer, to a different wallet, you want access to it, right? So it really goes into Sanctum and the growth of these LSTs. I think it's something like 17 million SOL are actually locked up in LSTs now. And I mean, from where we are now to where we started, like when I first came to Solana, there was 2 LSTs, right? It was ST Sol from Lido and M Sol from Marinade, right? Like those were the first 2, and those were the only options that you had. Like, and I thought that they were magic, right? You could pretty much buy them and you could unstake them instantly. And now there's over 1,000, right? And like Sanctum makes unstaking these like with their protocol super easy, super quick, and it's like a tiny fee for doing it. So, I mean, if you hold SOL, there's going to be inflation. I think it's like 3.8%, where if you hold the INF token, the average is something like 6.3%. So, I've always been a big fan of native staking. I don't like locking my tokens up if I don't have to. So yeah, I mean, I'm a fan. I'm not sure what your take is on the liquid staking versus native staking, but I'm just a fan of liquid staking.
Yeah, I like liquid staking. I like the composability. I like being able to borrow against it in a pinch if I need to. And it's actually a good time because I believe that Sanctum has actually just opened up the first invites to their waitlist for their app. So if you did sign up to the Sanctum iOS and Android app waitlist, go check your emails because you might be getting invited over there. They're tranching it out over week by week. So keep an eye on your emails and you might be able to get in sooner rather than later. Pushing on to the stat of the week, this touches on the obviously the tokenized equities that we've been talking about earlier, but Solana continues to surpass all L1 and L2 chains combined in tokenized stock trading volume, extending its lead to 53 consecutive weeks. That is more than a year. So for over a year, Solana has been the place to trade RWAs. It's been the place to trade tokenized stocks. This is brilliant. This is the crypto industry maturing. This is internet capital markets playing up before our very eyes, and you just love to see it.
Yeah, 100%. I want to see how much this changes after this weekend. Like, I am so bullish on what's going to happen with this SpaceX launch. So, I expect this to just go up exponentially, right?
Yeah. What I'm most curious to see over the course of this weekend is which SPX stock on Solana actually takes the cake and attracts the most volume and the most holdership. Because obviously we've got the backpack variety that's been brought through via Sunrise. We're going to have X stocks. We'll have a SpaceX token. Ondo will have their SpaceX token, and Pre-Stocks is also going to be transitioning their pre-IPO stock over to a live liquid asset. So we're going to have 4 different variants of the SpaceX equity on chain. Who's going to take the cut? Who's going to be the most liquid? Liquidity is kind of the only moat we have left for now. So I'm curious to see how Mark's going to react and who's going to actually take the lean there. But we're going to push on through State of Solana in a tweet. This one comes from Seraphim. Speaking about the SpaceX IPO, obviously, Seraphim's come out and he said, hard to understate the impact of this. Anyone in the world with internet access can participate in the most prominent IPO in recent history. Not only that, you win rewards for trading SpaceX on Solana as part of the program. Decentralized Nasdaq is finally here. Thomas, I agree. For me, this is the biggest event in financial history in the last 20 years, let's say. I think we've never seen an IPO of this size, $1.75 trillion. $1.75 trillion. It's going to be tradable on Solana on day one. No matter where you are in the world, if you have an internet connection and a Solana wallet, you can take part in this event. Historic, in one word.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, And it was so awesome to have Saeed on to actually discuss like how they were able to do this. But I mean, everybody's eyes are on it this morning, right? You know, so for us to even be able to play a part in this is huge. I just checked the price. It looks like it's at $157 right now. So, you know, we'll see where that is by the end of the day. And yeah, I mean, we'll see how it trades this weekend. But it's just like, I don't know. I can't stop thinking about how cool it is.
Yeah, my eyes are going to be fixed to the charts over the weekend. I'm hoping that price discovery happens on Solana over anywhere else. So yeah, that's where all my attention is going to be. Listen, yeah. Thomas, great to chat. Great to go through the newsletter. Great to speak with Saeed and catch up on the week's events. Massive week, obviously dominated entirely by the SpaceX IPO and of course the World Series of Poker announcement. But look, thanks for chatting, Thomas. We'll get back to it and we'll catch up next week.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Appreciate it. Huge week. Great newsletter.
Let's go.
That's a wrap for this week's Solana Weekly, brought to you by SolanaFloor. Now, if you found our coverage useful, then please subscribe to SolanaFloor on X and on YouTube, and we'll see you again next week.